Islam is often thought of as a recent arrival in Britain, yet its roots stretch back over 300 years, woven through empire, trade, war, migration, and faith. While Muslims are now a visible part of British society, the journey to this point has been long, complex, and often overlooked. The story begins not in Britain itself, but on the seas and in distant colonies. By the early 17th century, English sailors, merchants, and diplomats were encountering Islamic civilizations across the world in North Africa, the Ottoman Empire, and South Asia. The East India Company, formed in 1600, brought Britain into direct contact with Muslim-majority regions. Its traders, stationed in cities like Surat and Calcutta, engaged daily with Muslim rulers, merchants, and local populations. While Muslims weren't yet present in large numbers in Britain, Islam was no longer foreign to the British imagination. Books about the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, often critical or misunderstood, began circulating in English by the late 1600s, but the first known Muslims in Britain arrived not as diplomats or scholars, but as sailors. By the 1700s, Muslim lascars, seamen from South Asia, were employed by British ships. These men, mostly from Bengal, Gujarat, and Yemen, worked in harsh conditions and were often stranded in ports like London, Liverpool, and Cardiff. They formed some of the first Muslim communities in Britain, small, transient, and often invisible. Without family or legal rights, many lascars lived in poverty, yet they kept their faith alive in the shadows of empire. By the 19th century, the Muslim presence began to solidify. In 1860, a landmark moment occurred when W.H. Quilliam, a Liverpool-born solicitor, converted to Islam after traveling to Morocco. Taking the name Abdullah Quilliam, he became one of the earliest known English converts to Islam. In 1889, he founded the Liverpool Muslim Institute, which included Britain's first functioning mosque, a school, and a printing press. The mosque, located at 8 Brougham Terrace, became a hub for Islamic education and literature. Quilliam also published The Crescent, a weekly Islamic newspaper that circulated internationally. He built ties with Muslim leaders across the world, including the Ottoman Sultan Abdul Hamid II, who granted him the title of Sheikh-ul-Islam of the British Isles. Quilliam's work marked a shift. Islam was no longer a distant religion, but part of British religious life. Around the same time, another important development occurred in the capital. In London, the Nawab of Bhopal, a Muslim prince from India, financed the establishment of the Woking Mosque in 1889, designed by architect W.W.S. Chambers. The mosque officially opened in 1889 as part of the Oriental Institute founded by Dr. Gottlieb Wilhelm Leitner, a Hungarian-born linguist and Islamic scholar. Though not the first mosque ever built in Britain, Woking Mosque became the most influential in early 20th century Britain. It served as the main center for Eid prayers, interfaith dialogue, and the publication of Islamic texts in English. During the First World War, over 400,000 Muslim soldiers from British India fought for the British Empire. Many died on European soil. In recognition, the British government established a Muslim burial ground in Woking in 1917, which was restored in later years as a symbol of this forgotten sacrifice. Between the wars, interest in Islam among Britons slowly grew. A number of British aristocrats and intellectuals converted, including Lord Headley, Al-Hajj El-Farouk, a peer of the realm who converted in 1913, performed the Hajj, and advocated publicly for Islam. Marmaduke Pickthall, a novelist and former Anglican, who embraced Islam in 1917 and later produced one of the most respected English translations of the Quran in 1930. Despite these developments, the Muslim population remained small. Everything changed after World War II. Britain, rebuilding from war, invited labor from across the Commonwealth. Tens of thousands of Muslims arrived from Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and East Africa to work in industries, transport, the NHS, and construction. By the 1950s and 60s, vibrant Muslim communities began forming in cities like Birmingham, Bradford, Leicester, Manchester, and London. These migrants faced hardship, low wages, racism, and poor housing, but they built institutions first in homes and garages and later as mosques, halal butchers, madrasas, and community centers. In 1969, the London Central Mosque and Islamic Cultural Centre opened near Regent's Park, funded by King Faisal of Saudi Arabia. It became a prominent symbol of Islam's place in British society during the 1970s and 80s. Migration from Bangladesh, particularly Sylhet, and from East Africa accelerated, often due to political upheavals such as Idi Amin's expulsion of Asians from Uganda in 1972. Second-generation Muslims came of age in Britain during a time of economic downturn and rising nationalism. In response, Muslims increasingly organized politically and religiously. The Rushdie Affair in 1989, following the publication of the Satanic Verses, marked a watershed. Protests erupted across the UK. For many, it was the first time Islam was thrust out into the British media spotlight. It also exposed tensions between freedom of speech and religious offense, between secularism and belief, and between Muslims and mainstream institutions. From the 1990s onwards, Islam in Britain became both more visible and more politicized. Islamic schools were established. Mosques expanded. Muslim voices entered media, academia, and public discourse. By the 2001 census, 1.6 million Muslims were recorded in England and Wales, around 3% of the population. But tragedy struck later that year with the attacks of September 11, 2001, the global war on terror, and the subsequent invasion of Iraq in 2003 brought deep suspicion onto Muslim communities. The London bombings of July 7, 2005 further intensified scrutiny and fear. In response, British Muslims faced increased policing, surveillance, and media hostility, but also began building coalitions, civic institutions, and youth programs aimed at education, integration, and resilience. The years that followed were marked by dual narratives, one of tension, radicalization, and policy debates, and another of success, creativity, and contribution. By the 2011 census, the Muslim population had reached 2.7 million, and by 2021, it exceeded 3.8 million, accounting for 6.5% of the population of England and Wales. Today, Islam in Britain is a mosaic: Sunni and Shia, Sufi and Salafi, traditional and reformist with roots in South Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. Muslims in Britain now serve as doctors, teachers, and entrepreneurs, MPs and lords, artists, athletes, and journalists. Islamic institutions continue to grow in number and prominence, but also face new challenges, from far-right nationalism to debates on integration, Islamophobia, and identity. Yet despite the complexities, Islam in Britain has transitioned from a curiosity of empire to a cornerstone of modern, multicultural society. From the sailors of the 1700s to the converts of Victorian England to the workers of post-war Britain to the youth shaping the future. The history of Islam in Great Britain is not a story of outsiders, but of citizens, not a tale of invasion, but of presence, persistence, and peace. It is not a recent story, it is a British story.